Now we're going to have the talk Control, which is held by Kirsten Fiedler and Maryant Fernández from European Digital Rights and Estelle Masse from Access Now. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. It's still a little bit early, so thank you very much for coming. So welcome to this talk on control. So my name is Kirsten.
I'm Maryant.
And I'm Estelle. Hi.
And so 2 years after the first Snowden revelations, mainstream media has become much more aware about, surveillance by states and also by corporations.
So we've been asking ourselves, where is the resistance from this movement? And why are there still so many people thinking that they have nothing to hide and therefore nothing to fear?
So we've been thinking about this a bit, and we came out with two main reasons. The first one is because of the intangible nature of surveillance, is what Sasha Lobo called radioactivity. And the second main reason is because this is often a very part of a bigger picture, a bigger game of control. And everyone here in Republica, I think, will agree with me that information is power nowadays. And then we're living in what Gilles Deleuze called a society of control, where everything is monitored and nothing is left alone for long. So here today, we're going to talk about three things in terms of control: our life in general, our thoughts, and our movement. So first of all, why these three fields and not something else? Well, because we have just 1 hour, and because we don't want to bore you, and because we think that these three are very important things that we hope you enjoy. So now I'm going to talk about how the internet is being used to control our lives by three actors that's in our life. So the first ones are governments, the second ones are companies, and the third one ourselves. Yes, ourselves. So first one. Governments. If we look back in history, we see that a lot of totalitarian countries actually had two things in mind. First of all was control, and the second one was power. And how different is that from nowadays? So letting aside our democratic foundation, actually the answer is very little, in our opinion. So we see, and it's not a big surprise for you guys, that the NSA and other surveillance agencies want to have total control of the population. But also, law enforcement authorities actually in the European Union are seeking to do more in different fields such as terrorism, hate speech, or so-called radicalization, whatever that means. In terms of terrorism, I don't know if you know that there's a proposal of a directive on combating terrorism that actually says that if you threaten to kidnap, for example, let's say, your prime minister's son, and if you unduly compel him to do something, to commit any act, then you would be likely to be a terrorist, and then member states should punish you. And so in practice, if I tweet that, apparently, according to this proposal of a directive, I would be a terrorist. I don't think I'm a terrorist. I don't know if you think I am a terrorist. I hope with this talk I prove I am not. So also, a second element of control in our lives comes from companies. It is not a surprise to you that when you use Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or even when you read newspapers, it is not for free. Your data, what you do online, your behavior comes with a price. So a clear example of how this works is targeted advertisements. It's not a surprise to you, I guess, that when you actually imagine that you're looking for a dress or for some trousers, and then afterwards you go to other websites or to your social media sites, you see targeted advertisement about clothes and related things, and it's like, oh, this is very interesting because like a couple of days ago, a couple of months ago, I was looking exactly for that. What a coincidence. I love these sites, right? I think for me it's disturbing that when I am writing an email in Hotmail, I actually see ads on my right about the content that I've been exchanging with my contacts. I don't know if it's disturbing for you, but this is the reality. So second thing is the Internet of Things. So here you can see different types of devices that you may use because you may think that they're convenient. So there's different fitness trackers that would allow you apparently to become thinner. You can also have a mattress. So if you suspect that is called this Mattress, it's a Spanish invention that apparently if you have a suspicion that your partner is not being faithful, then these awesome Mattress, because everything's smart, like my smartphone and like all these smartphones, they will tell you if he or she is using the mattress while you're not there. Yes, how cool, right? Because we only have beds. And also, we have other devices like the Melomind, which also tracks your brain waves and actually afterwards matches the music according to your brain waves. It's very interesting, but I don't know if you're happy to share all this data with companies. And then many examples that would lead to what Bruce Snyder calls the Internet of Things will be the world's biggest robot, where you don't have the control, but somebody else has the control. And you don't even know what control of what you would need or would like to have, because you don't even know the data that is being out there. So the third element of the control of our lives is by ourselves, I told you before. So I want to introduce you to this guy. His name is Chris Dancy. He doesn't believe in privacy, he says, but so in 2008 he decided, like, well, a lot of companies are monitoring our lives, so I want to know what kind of data they have about himself, he said. And then so what he did is to connect himself to all of the devices he could think of into his body and his house, and he created different databases to have an overview of how he could improve his life. So he became thinner, and he apparently is happier. And what I think is very interesting, even though I'm a privacy advocate, is that he says that we want people to behave like machines, and we expect machines to behave like people. So I would like you to think about that, because I think he has a very good point on that, and I don't know if that's the world we want to believe in and for the future. The second example I would like to introduce you is Rob Spence. He actually lost his sight of his right eye when he was 9. So he's a filmmaker, so he thought that it would be nice to actually replace his flawed eye with a camera. So he's kind of a pirate most of the times. He says that he doesn't use this camera all the time, but so I can imagine that, I don't know if you would be comfortable if you see Rob in the street and then he's not wearing the patch, and then he's talking to you. Would you be comfortable if he was recording all your conversations or your movements, or, you know? He says that he doesn't do it, but there's no means to see whether that would happen or not, right? So in the end, what we end up with is the Internet of Me. So we might well be moving from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Me, according to Andre Spicer and Kan Sederström. They're Swedish researchers that actually came to that conclusion. And actually, I agree in the sense that nowadays it's not your Internet. It's all about you, but without you being in control, and we need to regain that control. But in that sense, I'm actually very interested in another part of our lives, and that's here, our thoughts. So Kirsten, do you have anything to say about our thoughts?
Yes. Okay, so next part where we see that there's control is actually our thinking. And well, thanks to technological developments in the past years, there's so many new possibilities for media control. And this then takes the control of our thinking also to a whole new level. So there's multiple ways in which different actors, mostly governments, try to control the media in order to influence the debate. And then to influence thoughts and actions and thereby control society. And, well, contrary to what you might think now, this is not only a very common characteristic to repressive regimes, but it happens also in countries belonging to the European Union. So what is media control, and how does this affect our thinking? First example is our political spins. You don't see it very well. Anyways, political spins are a very old art form that goes back to the ancient Greeks. So spins are not only a method for governments, but also for companies in order to advance their agendas, either to make you vote for something or not oppose yourself to a certain policy, or to make you buy something. And, well, spins are basically biased interpretations of events or news in order to convince the public of a certain goal. And spins don't always need to be a bad thing, because NGOs do it too, right? We all try to spin the news. But we only need to be concerned when a spin becomes so dominant that it becomes propaganda. And nowadays, spins don't only come from one direction anymore, for example, from one politician. Spins come from everywhere, because messages can get distributed so quickly and are multiplied on a very, very large scale. So, let's take an example for a spin. The topic of refugees is a very, very good way to show you how a spin can be used in order to manipulate the public discourse. And last year, David Cameron referred to refugees as a swarm of people coming across the Mediterranean. Now, the word swarm always has a negative ring to it. It's never a very pleasant idea to have a swarm coming your way. And as John Oliver put it, even if it's a swarm of kittens, you still get a tiny bit worried, right? So the tone of the debate then has a direct impact on the public perception of policies that are being proposed. So now, will the use of the word swarm create more sympathy towards refugees, or will it actually lead to the fact that, well, people might be in favor of the creation of more barriers in order to stop this swarm? And, well, I think the answer is pretty clear when you look at the rise of all the right-wing and anti-immigrant movements across Europe. Another nice example for a spin is a campaign by the French government last year. And here the French government wanted to warn about radicalization. So this nice infograph gives you advice on how to spot a terrorist. So apparently the process of radicalization also includes that you don't eat baguette anymore and that you change your clothing style. So for me, this is a very fine example of, well, pure fear-mongering. But from more or less harmful spins, pushing control a tiny bit further even, is the development of counter-narratives, also called sometimes propaganda or psyops. And counter-narratives are basically stories that are created to go against certain messages, like, for example, positive messages about peace, tolerance, and democracy in order to fight against right-wing extremism. And like spins, counter-narratives are a very old and effective tradition. And Victor Hugo once pointed out that you can fight the invasion of an army, but you probably can't fight the invasion of an idea. And this invasion of ideas was also the central logic behind a very sophisticated US program during the Cold War, where the US aimed at shaping public opinion, not only at home, but across the entire globe. And then after the end of the Cold War, the so-called War of Ideas was then further developed by secret services all around the globe. And what changed was the vocabulary. In a paper from last year, the Rand Corporation mentioned that, the words propaganda or political warfare were a tiny bit unhelpful. So the political world slowly started to adapt the term counter-narratives. And now we are entering a whole new era of propaganda and counter-propaganda, where new technologies allow the super rapid dissemination of ideas. And Western governments are more and more using private companies in order to do this. They are using the Googles and the Facebooks in order to educate the people. So let's take, for example, this European Internet Forum. So this is an initiative where the Commission and Europol sit down with the big 5 biggest US companies, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Ask.fm, and Microsoft. Well, anyway, with 5 big US companies in order to, well, see how these companies can fight against, what they can do in order to fight against terrorism. And one of the goals here is also to challenge the terrorist narrative. And this then is very problematic for 2 reasons. Well, firstly, because it leads to privatized censorship. Companies deal more and more with problems that should actually be the responsibility of the state. And the rule of law is then being replaced with terms and conditions or community standards. And secondly, well, I don't need to explain the importance of narratives here at a media conference. So we all know that these are stories that are supposed to stick in people's minds. And with this, then, the powerful are able to fix the premises of the discourse and to decide what the population can see, hear, and think. And we can see this, for example, also reflected in today's debates about terrorism. We rarely see articles that discuss the responsibilities of Western states for the causes of terrorism in the countries of origin, for example. Or we don't see articles about Western mistakes in responses to terrorist acts, or very rarely. So, but new media companies do not only influence the stories, the narratives, they also have gained the power to actually control directly who you are, and they can engineer the public without even the public's knowledge. So, who here is on Facebook? Okay, so I guess then you're happy to learn that you're part of the new generation of guinea pigs. Because in 2012, Facebook carried out an experiment and manipulated people's timelines in order to test, well, the emotional reactions of their users. And in Facebook's study, they concluded that emotions expressed by friends via online social networks constitute the first experimental evidence for massive-scale emotional contagion via social networks. And yes, they can do all this with your data because you have agreed to Facebook's terms and conditions. And these state that Facebook can use your personal information to carry out surveys and, well, academic research. But Facebook actually doesn't stop there. In a paper from the University of California from 2012, analyzed another very ambitious experiment in civic engineering by the social network that took place in 2010. And at the time, Facebook wanted to find out if it could get previously not interested people to vote in the US congressional midterm elections. So the experiment was super simple. Facebook showed the user a graphic with a link to look up the next voting place. And it also showed you the faces of 6 friends that had allegedly also already voted. So in 2010, Facebook's experiment created social pressure, which then caused more people to vote. And, well, only 2 months ago, Facebook started to ask itself internally what responsibility it had to stop Donald Trump. And you don't need to like Donald Trump a lot, but I find it certainly very creepy that, yeah, that private companies have the power and also an interest in manipulating our democratic systems. But of course, Facebook is not the only company doing this. Yeah, Apple and Google have their own little projects too. Google influences, for example, by tweets like this one here. And my question is, can tweets like this one actually push Bernie Sanders higher in the search rankings? And can then higher rankings also bring him more support in return? And research published by Robert Epstein and Ronald Robertson actually suggests that Google has the potential for large-scale manipulation of election results. And Apple just bought a company called Emotioned last year, but we don't know what it intends to do with this. So Emotioned develops software to assess emotions based on reading facial expressions. And on its website, it says wherever there are cameras, there can be video analysis of expressions and an opportunity to learn about the customer's state of mind. So online companies increasingly distribute information in a way that serves their own ideological or economical agendas. And this method then also becomes super attractive for governments, of course. The EU Commission, for example, started funding emotion tracking and gave 3.6 million euros to Real Eyes. And Real Eyes is a London-based startup that tracks people's reactions to webcams and smartphone cameras in order to analyze their emotions. So, spins, counter-narratives, and civic engineering are a rather soft method to control the media and to control what you might think and say. But there's also the hard method, but we don't have enough time here to speak about this, which is prosecution, harassment, and threats against journalists. But all this then leads to a decline of the open debate. And also a decline of the quality of the information that's available to people. So, if we're not controlling our life anymore and our thinking anymore, can we at least still go wherever we want?
Thank you, Kirsten. So, as you might have understood, I will present the third element of this control puzzle, which is the control of our movement, which might be the least obvious one. We all think that we are moving freely, but we'll show through example that we are actually controlling our movement, even though we don't necessarily realize it. So at first, we have the historical habit from governments to not only control the movement of their citizens within their territory, but in particular at their border. This affects the freedom of movement, which is a right that is encompassed in the Human Rights Declaration. It is one also of the most important freedom we have in the EU, and it's encompassed in our treaties. You might have experienced it a lot of time by having the right not only to go around your country, but also to go visit another country and return freely, or also to choose to go live abroad without any issue or work abroad. This is your freedom of movement. You acknowledge that you have it, but however, government can of course infringe in this. And there is different way where they can do this. They can infringe on your freedom of movement either by cancelling your passport, by putting you under house arrest, or in the case of refugees, by limiting your entry into a country while you're fleeing your own country for political reasons. This is an image of the Zaatari camp in Jordan, which is the biggest camp of Syrian refugees to date, according to recent UN status. It is said that there is 1.4 million Syrian refugees in Jordan in total, not all of them in that camp, but in the country in total, and over 1 million in Lebanon. And if we compare with the total number of refugees in the EU, the latest data from early 2016 indicate that in the EU there is 1.2 million refugees. Only 50% of them are actually from Syria, despite what the media has been explaining, and the rest of the refugees are coming mostly from Afghanistan and Iraq. Looking at the status of the refugees currently and the situation in the EU, we have all seen the disastrous response from our governments, not only in terms of the number of refugees that we've actually took into our countries, but also the condition in which we've welcomed those refugees that were fleeing war zones. We've seen all of these images of refugees sleeping on rail tracks, sleeping outside during the winter, not having access to administrative supports in order to file their asylum request, not having access to remedy in case their rights were being abused, not having access to their basic rights. Unfortunately, this does not stop here, because the EU is planning to introduce new measures that will affect their right to privacy. After having all of their basic rights infringed, we've seen the last 2 weeks, the EU has introduced a new proposal for border control. So this is not a title from the next Daft Punk song. This is actually what the EU wants to do with their border. They want them smarter, better, and stronger. We don't really know what does it actually mean, but it's considered in this program, which was initially proposed 2 years ago, and was the aim of speeding the border control for any travelers entering the EU. So it was mostly about pure migration policies, changing the visa system, changing the stamping system, and also adding this part of new biometric collection of data. This was already a first issue for privacy because much more personal data about all travelers coming to EU were going to be collected. But the very important impact for specifically affecting refugees and asylum seekers is one of the main goals of this Smart Border program is to track what the EU called the overstayers, people that are staying in the EU territory longer than what the EU wants them to. So there is specific tracking done through this procedure in order to identify those persons and possibly find them and send them back to their country. So if you're an asylum seeker which do not have the access to the administrative document that you need in order to file your demand, you might be sent back to your country because you've been identified as an overstayer. This is, of course, only one aspect of the Smart Border package. It will actually affect literally anybody traveling in the EU, out of the EU, and also within the EU. This was not initially planned to cover also the travel intra-EU, because it's a clear infringement of the internal freedom of movement, but this was added at the demand of the French government following the attacks. And this is why this proposal is somewhat similar to another that you might have heard of, which is the Passenger Name Record Directive, which tracks the movement of every flying from the EU into and possibly within, if the member states wants to, which was discussed for 3 years in the EU with a lot of controversy and a lot of pushback from the European Parliament, given the fundamental right concern for our right to privacy. But with the strong political pressure of the attacks in Paris and recently in Brussels, the proposal was adopted 1 week after, I think, the attacks in Brussels, and it's now going to be implemented. And together with the Smart Border package and with the new types of surveillance pushed forward by the EU, this will create a harmful, shady bias surveillance system, which affects everybody moving within the EU and will affect even more the vulnerable population, which are the refugees and the asylum seekers. Which leads us to a situation where even though you have the feeling that you have this freedom of movement because you're actually as an EU citizen or as an EU resident when you're legally established here, I'm talking about, of course, this category of citizens already, which is not everybody, you have the feeling that you can move freely through the EU, that you can take a plane and come back and you have this freedom, but actually you're being controlled at every single movement you're making between your country. And this is what Gilles Deleuze called the paradigm of thinking that you have this freedom, but you're being controlled all the time. And that's what looks like is our future when we see this proposal put on the table. And those mechanisms are helped with some new types of technology that have potentially very good use, but are also being put at the use for surveillance and altering our privacy. You all know, of course, of the examples of the mobile phone and the wearable devices as clearly mechanisms that can be used for tracking purposes. We've talked about them extensively. We've discussed the use of biometric data, the further collection of those data through the border controls. There is also new types of camera being developed and implemented. The camera with facial recognition or the cameras which measures your temperature. The one with the temperature is actually planning to be displayed in all French train stations by the National Railway Company in order to identify every traveler that might be more stressed than usual or speaking with a voice higher than the rest or running through the train station. So, because it can represent a risk or it can be a potential terrorist, it can also be somebody who's fearing to miss this train, but I mean, it's 50-50. And finally, one of the most used device at the moment which use is absolutely not regulated by the EU or very few countries is this little thing here. You might have seen it in most of your clothes. It's an Arif Id Tag, which has a very specific use. It's in order to track the production and the selling of a piece of clothes, a jean or a T-shirt. And so the retailer basically put it on a store, on the production chain, and it has information on where it has been produced, where it's going to be shipped, and which store it's going to be sold. And it should be removed at the moment where it's sold. That's what a commission recommendation indicates. But you maybe know that a commission recommendation is not actually a very strong instrument. It's not fully binding, and therefore it's absolutely not enforced. So most of the time you go home with this tag still activated. It does say in really big in the tag, cut before use, but it's just a tag. You don't necessarily look at it. It's covered by all the rest of the tags you have in your clothes. So you might keep this tag on for a while. Some of them are not very harmful and automatically deactivate as you exit the store with it, but a lot of them stay activated. And with those tags, each time you enter a shop that has an RFID reader, people could be able to follow your movements through the city. Those can seem harmless, but with that you can really have a pattern of movement like you have with your mobile phone. So when we're faced with all these systems of surveillance and all these new types of surveillance developed, and how the control of movement, thoughts, and your control of your lives is being spread around and being further developed, we asked each other in the preparation of these talks, what can be the alternative and what are the solutions that all together as a society we can do to stop this control?
Yes, so we've heard a few minutes ago about many problems in our lives, many problems in our thoughts, going in our mind, many problems in our movement. So, however, I don't want you to go home and be like, oh, these three women only talking about the problems that we already knew, most of them. I want to do something. Actually, the three of us, what we want you to do is to, while we're speaking here and while we are going to have a chat afterwards, that you think about ways to improve this. Because we need to focus on the alternative and not about the control. So my first recommendation, or our first recommendation for you guys, is innovation for good. So I want to tell you the story of Neil Harbison. So before I explain you two examples of so-called cyborgs, right? So the Chris Nancy that control his life, and also Rob Spence that replace his eye with a camera. So Neil Harbison actually could not recognize colors. So let's see that, so while he was seeing you guys, he could not identify whether you were wearing yellow shirt or red trousers. He would see the same colors. So actually, some very clever guys actually developed a device that was improved several times to the point that, so he has behind his back a device that actually tells him the kinds of colors that he's seeing by sounds. So apparently now he even can see the colors better than us and can identify like different shades of yellow. So instead of saying yellow, he would say like I'm seeing a clear yellow or something like that. So if you are part of a startup, if your job is to be, I don't know, whatever in a company, if your job is to be an activist, if your job is to be a journalist, do something. Get inspired. I want you to get inspired, really. The second one is privacy by design. So as I said before, if Sasha Lowe actually yesterday put a lot of emphasis on becoming entrepreneurs, I think we need not only to become entrepreneurs, but in whatever job, in whatever part of your life you're developing, actually that you do something. Use, if you have an idea in your mind of a startup, for example, use privacy as an asset. Let's stop trading our privacy for convenience, as Chris Danza says. He says that actually, because he doesn't believe in privacy, that actually, since all these devices are very useful to us, that we should stop caring about our privacy because we don't have it anymore. Do you agree? I hope you said no. So just use the privacy by design, embed it, and make sure you spread the word, and we make this world a better place, because in the end, it's our world. So instead of just complaining, I think it's very good to find solutions. So another solution that we thought of is that you confuse the algorithms, that you fight against the profiling of these companies that are trying to put on you without you even being under control, because you probably have heard this narrative saying that, oh, who reads here the terms and conditions? I want to see the hands. Okay, 2. Okay. okay, let's say that these 3 people that have read the terms of conditions of one of these applications of services actually read them, right? So what do? I mean, well, you see outrageous things that basically they can do whatever they want with your data, with the use of that application, so what do? Not much, whether you accept it or whether you don't use the application or the service, right? So let's just use our ability to be creative, and then, for example, if you usually buy, I don't know, your food online, just buy random stuff or just change your name and make it harder for the algorithms to actually show the results they want you to see. The final one that I want you to remind, because I know that many of you know already, is to use the anonymity and encryption, and so use the technology that is out there to actually protect your life. So you already probably know Tor, Signal, VPNs, Internet Cubes, and so many more services and applications that you, I'm sure, are going to develop to make our lives easier, right? Yes. Kirsten.
Okay, so what can we do to fight against, spins, counter-narratives, and fight against the fact that various actors try to control the media in order to control what we think and what we say? One super obvious thing is to actually check the facts. Because really, do it. When you read when you read an article in news somewhere, just try to find other sources in order to verify if it's all correct. Because sometimes it's just copy and paste from governmental press releases or from European Commission press releases. So it's always good to do this. And another thing that Markus Beckedahl already said here yesterday on stage 1, and I think we should change the slogan from Markus Beckedahl changed my life to Markus Beckedahl stole my slides. One solution is access to information requests. Make access to document requests to your governments, because the right to obtain documents allows us to expose actually the inner workings of governments. It helps to keep the state accountable and to have evidence-based discussions. So there's various portals for the EU. You can use, for example, Ask the EU, or in Germany it's Frag den Staat. Another thing that we need is legal protection of whistleblowers, because unfortunately in Europe there's still no comprehensive legal protection. At the moment, whistleblowers risk their careers, reputations, family, everything. So we need EU-wide legal protection. And unfortunately, policy at the moment at the EU level goes exactly into the wrong direction with the adoption of the Trade Secret Service Directive. Yes. And then, well, we also need more media outlets to actually publish the leaks in order to just quote them.
For the part in controlling the movement, I just have 3 short ideas or recommendations, but would like actually to hear from you guys on more ideas. So one of the things which is a little bit in the same goes in the same direction as what Maryant proposed on data obfuscation, to play with the algorithm. Here it's to play with the camera by just using this guys. If there is so much facial recognition, the slide which was actually shown before is from a very great talk that was given at CCC, which shows like how actually by your movement or the way you present yourself in front of the camera, you can actually false the recognition of the camera. This is of course not a long-term solution, only a short-term solution. There should be more effort in making sure that the installation of cameras does not become a normal thing for us to do and we don't start seeing cameras everywhere, but this is a really short-term solution. Another point is to become the next Max Schrems. He's shown us that with a lot of time and a lot of energy, you can take down safe harbor. There is a lot of harmful legislation that is being adopted, PNR being the one of them, and we need more people like Max to go to court and challenge those legislation. And finally, remove all the trackers. So when you purchase your phone and when you purchase most of the wearables, they have the tracking options on by default. Look at them online and learn how to remove them. Most of them, not all of them will be possible. Again, this is really a short-term solution, but you can reduce your fingerprint online by removing all the trackers. And we have a final one, which is maybe a more general one, which applies to the whole control paradigm, which don't be afraid of being different, of being yourself. The right to privacy is the right to be you, to be different, to not be like the government wants you to not be the normal according to the government, but the normal according to you. Don't be afraid to be different, because if you start changing yourself, then we start losing.
Okay, so besides being yourself, and besides being different, whatever that means to you, you can also support local organizations. So I don't know if you knew European Digital Rights, EDRI, and our super powerful member Access Now, but you do now know about them. So I hope you can support us and your local organizations. It's very important that you actually do something, even just contact us, contact any other organization that you know. We need help. So to give you an idea, in Brussels, we're just 3 people dealing with policy. All of these proposals that we've seen before, 3 people plus Estelle and her team, and also another organization, that's it. So I hope you actually get inspired again. And now we would like to hear your thoughts, your doubts, your comments, your questions. And you can always follow us then on Twitter, also at EDRI and Access Now. Visit our websites, and thank you very much.
There's a question right there.
Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. I really enjoyed it. And I have one question that might be too specific, so I'm already sorry if it's not fair. But my question goes in the direction of a lot of the security measures you've mentioned and you've criticized, and rightly so, I share your concerns. A lot of these measures are reactions to certain developments, to an influx of refugees or to security concerns because of terrorism. And the solutions you offered usually went into the direction of private security and private safety and privacy of your data, which is all very important. But I think there is a need in a lot of countries in Europe and in the West there is a public need for safety. Whether it's justified or not is another question, but people want to feel safe. People want to feel protected from terrorism. People are unsure. And I was just thinking that I agree with a lot of your criticism, but you have to offer some sort of alternative when it comes to these issues. With the privacy and the personal data, you offer a lot of alternatives, and there's a lot out there. But when it comes to the more sort of societal issues of safety and just general welfare, I feel like this kind of crowd here sometimes lacks the answer to those kind of issues. And I don't think it's enough to just say, you're safe, your concerns are not valid, like they're overblown. Some of them surely are, but I think there still needs to be done more to offer an alternative that also offers some sort of, I don't know, safety measures or for the people.
Thank you. That's actually a very important point, and a lot of the discussion that we had during the passenger name record, in particular discussion, and during the discussion on the Directive on combating terrorism. What you say is actually very important. There is a reaction from governments after tragic attacks of passing legislation very fast to give the people the feeling of being safe. And what we've been combating is the rush in passing drastic surveillance measure, giving people this feeling that something is being done for the safety, but actually not changing the security issues. There was the case already after, if you remember, the London and Madrid attacks. 6 months after, the Data Retention Directive was adopted, which has now been overturned by the court for infringing fundamental rights. 2 weeks after the Brussels attack, the PNR Directive was adopted. Exact same concerns, and it will follow the same path in the court. The issue we had with the PNR Directive is that after the Brussels, and especially after the Paris attack, we've asked the French government to conduct an inquiry on the failure of the intelligence, because France, as you know, has expanded so much their surveillance that people were not understanding, if you have so much data, how come did you not stop those attacks? The French government and the French opposition to the government refused to do such inquiry because we're so close to the political election that either of the results would have shown that during one or the other government, some harmful legislation was adopted in order to make the work of intelligence and the police much more difficult. A lot of actually intelligence officers were saying that too much data is not helpful to their work. It's using this data appropriately. And after the Brussels and the Paris attack, a lot of the time we've heard over and over that the police knew the suspect in either of the region, but just were not communicating between each other. So they had the data, they were not making the usage of this data as need be. And they also had too much data because you just need the data about the suspect, the one they had, and pass this information to the relevant authority, which did not happen. We asked them whether they would consider putting something like that in the PNR directive, and they just said, no, the member state will never agree to that. The result is you have surveillance measures surveilling absolutely everything on basis of no suspicion, and even if at some point this directive might be useful and you can find one terrorist, the member states do not have the obligation to share this information with the other countries. So let's put an example. With the PNR directive, Germany finds out that somebody is planning to do an attack in France. They do not have the obligation to inform France about that. People might think you're safer with the PNR directive, but maybe in practice this will not happen. So it's true that we need to propose alternative, but at the same time, when you take decision in such difficult situation, you just pass the first legislation, you have it on the table, you're not looking at exactly what's in it, and you end up adopting legislation that harming all of the population. And to be honest, we had a lot of lawmakers telling us how bad they felt about adopting the PNR directive and that they were wishing that we would take it to court to fight it. That's not the way we should do policy making, hoping that there is one courageous activist that will take it to court to challenge it because you were not able to take the political courage of fighting for the right solution, even if it takes a few more months to actually make the situation different.
And also, if I just might add, in order to increase the general security all around the globe, as I said before, maybe we have to finally also look at Western responsibilities in the countries of origin. What are we doing out there? You know, what are our involvements in the countries where terrorism surfaces?
Yeah, and also just to add as well, I think your question is right at the point that we need to discuss. I think one of the alternatives is to encourage people to think by themselves, think whether the measures proposed are being really efficient, necessary, and proportionate. And the challenge, as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, he said that the challenge for 2016 is to actually ensure that countries have human rights in their agendas while trying to fight against terrorism, which is very key. It seems that human rights are just this beautiful concept, but did you know or did you remember that actually that your right to life is also human rights? Did you know that your right to privacy is just not something that we'd like to campaign for just because we think we need our privacy? It's a human right. Our freedom of expression is a human right. So there's proof, actually, for example, the UN Plan of Action Against Violent Extremism, it says that there's evidence showing that countries that use more repressive policies actually encourage violent extremism more and not the opposite. And do you know that, for example, after the Paris attacks, what the French government decided to do? To ask for the derogation of the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, the UK does not only want to leave the European Union, but also to have a derogation of the European Convention of Human Rights, because they say that they know how to protect it already, meaning that all of the other countries in the world don't know how to protect human rights. Is it the world we want, to just have security and not human rights? I want both, and I hope that you do too. And I think critical thinking it's very, very important. And then just ensure that your politicians hear you and that you support really common sense. Because, for example, I mentioned before the Directive on combating terrorism that is currently being drafted. So the proposal, to give you an idea, the proposal was made in December. It was drafted in 2 weeks. According to the Commission guidelines, they need to provide an impact assessment to check whether the measures are efficient and unnecessary and proportionate and comply with human rights standards. They said that they didn't need to do it. So it seems that terrorism is a very complex issue, but does not deserve the time to think about it, but then that's where we fail. Now the Council, so where all of the member states of the European Union, so the 28 countries of the EU, are already took the position. And the European Parliament right now, actually at this moment, they're having a meeting to discuss how they're going to really restrict our rights. And in the proposal of the European Commission, they say that this directive respects human rights. It's like, maybe not. So that's why we're there, and I hope you also engage and develop critical thinking as you just did.
Okay, with extensive answers as these, we have time for one more question.
And it is a very quick one, because as I perceived your work, it was always about calmly explaining where privacy does not oppose safety, and where measures that are sold as safety measures actually do not increase safety, but at the same time creep on human rights. So my question now is, are you seen as opposing safety concerns sometimes? Is that also one of the things you have to deal with besides, because I imagine always you try to reach people and to get your message across, and does this ever happen that you are seen as opposing the safety of the people? That's all. It's a yes or no question basically.
That was actually interesting, because for this debate, we knew this might happen, and that's why also we were discussing alternative and other solution rather than the one proposed on the table, to not change the discourse like that. We had, in our experience, a lot of easy attacks from some politicians that were not in favor of the arguments we were putting on the table. During the net neutrality debate, we've been called of being in favor of child pornography, of being Talibans, and in such a difficult issue like terrorism, we thought that this possibility might come at some point and completely derate the debate from the issue we were discussing. I have to say that during the PNR debate, this never came up, luckily. At the same time, we ran a really large campaign with more than 1,100 citizens emailing the parliament, contacting the parliament, calling the parliament, asking them to not vote for the PNR. But the political pressure was so high on the other side that the proponent of the measure knew that this will go through really fast, so they didn't engage with us at all. We didn't have any meetings possible with the rapporteurs, and it was just no engagement at all. So we were not necessarily attacked on this proposal, because from the very beginning it was really hard to oppose it. There were no need for them to engage, because actually, very interestingly, most of the media, 20 minutes after the attack in Brussels, most of the French media, to be honest, were blaming the EU for the attack happening for not having adopted the PNR directive already. So that completely started, and that was a really strong media spin against the European Parliament for not taking their responsibility, allegedly, and that completely stopped any possibilities of engaging in a positive debate.
But not all of the NGOs that are fighting for privacy are that lucky. Our observer member, La Quadrature du Net in France, last year, right after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, launched campaigns in order to, bring back the debate on an evidence-based level in France, and they got attacked super heavily by the opposition, by the other side, saying that they were actually helping terrorism and so on. So it can happen. Also, one thing, the conservatives also used the Paris attacks at the EU level in order to say, okay, now if we don't push through the security measures that were on the table very quickly, then all those who oppose this are actually helping to have more bloodshed. It was very populist. It was very ugly. So it can happen. For PNR, it wasn't true. But yeah, because there was just no major opposition against PNR.
Yeah. But they did it again after the Brussels attacks. Yeah, saying that the left would actually, I mean, the terrorists would actually vote for the left, which is ridiculous and very, I would say, very damaging and yeah, even for themselves, I think.
Oh.
Okay, then there's one last question right here.
More comment. Hello, thanks for your speech. I think the whole thing control is more between freedom of speech, and all the privacy, being free, being yourself. And the other thing is control with a politic of fear. You can't have both. You can't have security and freedom for society and for the individual at the same time. I find it more a distraction than really a danger, to say it like this, that terrorists are a threat to societies. This issue is more used very often, as you can see in Spain, in France, and everywhere else, to push agendas, to control people, to control media, to restrict human rights, and we should all ask ourselves where it comes from and who's taken advantage of it. And I find it very strange that, for example, in France is still not really the normal right. I don't know the English word for it. It's not war right now, but it's very restricted. You can't do any demonstration. And in the media now, nobody tells anything about, for example, the really big movement of Nuit Debout. I don't know if this is right pronounced.
Yeah, debout. Mm-hmm.
And everything like that. Like in Spain, you can't do any demonstration without risking hundreds and thousands of euro to pay as a fine. Nobody's talking about that. And this is the control I really am against it. That the security against terrorism, the war of terrorism, which is not working anywhere, as you can see, and we all know. I think we should focus on the other side, on the politician, on the agendas of the politicians and the big global contour. Yeah. So not focusing on the private side, but more focusing on what we are risking to lose all those societies we have built up, at least in Europe.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Actually, in some of the meetings we had with politicians, I've been told that, yeah, Maryant, you need to give me concrete benefits for the population because everybody's watching me. And how can I tell the voters that actually I would not be in favor of these measures that the other parties are praising as fighting terrorism? What do I say? What's the benefit for the population if I say no? And I think that's very key. But I don't think it's a question of either or. I think it's both. Because if we win on one side and we lose on the other side, we're not going to change anything. If the politicians, and imagine that the politicians are convinced that repressive measures are not the solution, but the population starts being very dramatic and criticizing the government, this will change the public, their opinion. So it's a question of both from my perspective.